What happens when millions of people just decide they don't need the national power grid anymore? Well, let's dive right into this explainer, mapping out what is honestly one of the most dramatic citizen-led energy transformations happening anywhere in the world right now. We're looking at Pakistan, where a quiet revolution has literally taken over the rooftops. And what's wild is that this isn't some transition driven by grand government declarations or top-down policies. It's a shift born out of sheer necessity, driven by ordinary citizens and businesses making a really simple, brutal calculation for their own financial survival. Today, we're exploring how a legacy power grid is completely colliding with the unstoppable force of cheap solar technology.
To really wrap our heads around the massive scale of this shift, just look at this staggering number: 17 gigawatts. That's the solar panel capacity Pakistan imported in 2024 alone. It's an astronomical figure that caught almost every official planner entirely off guard, completely bypassing the traditional state-controlled energy infrastructure.
And this brilliantly illustrates something absolutely mind-blowing. A seemingly quiet revolution happening right on the rooftops of ordinary citizens has completely outpaced a whole decade of highly planned, multi-billion-dollar traditional state infrastructure.
So, we're going to unpack the unintended consequences of this success story today. We'll cover a quiet solar revolution, the IPP trap, the utility death spiral, the battery storage wave, the equity problem, and finally, adapter be left behind.
Part 1. A quiet solar revolution. This citizen-led boom.
Now, what's really fascinating here is the explosive 10-fold increase in registered net-metered solar capacity in just a 2-year window. We're talking about jumping from roughly half a gigawatt to over 5 gigawatts. As I mentioned, this wasn't sparked by a grand policy, it was ordinary people trying to financially survive, completely driven by a massive 60% drop in Chinese panel prices.
But wait, it gets crazier. When you factor in off-grid systems and unregistered setups, the actual capacity completely dwarfs the official numbers. We're talking an estimated 27 to 47 gigawatts. That practically rivals the entire conventional grid. It's basically millions of individual votes of no confidence in the state grid.
Which brings us to Part 2, the IPP trap, a crisis of their own making.
To understand exactly why millions fled the grid in the first place, we have to look at the structural trap that drove electricity prices to these completely unsustainable heights. In less than a decade, tariffs skyrocketed nearly 5-fold. Just imagine your own bill doing that. This massive spike was fueled by a depreciating currency, grid line losses, and most importantly, suffocating capacity payments to independent power producers.
So the really crucial point here is this colossal figure: 2.1 trillion rupees. That represents the annual capacity payments made to these private power plants in 2024. And get this, that's paid before a single electron is even generated. Because of how these contracts are structured, it's a massive fixed cost that gets passed directly right onto the public.
Moving on to Part 3, the utility death spiral, success causing failure.
As the biggest commercial and residential consumers rush to install solar to escape those crazy tariffs, they inadvertently trigger a systemic financial trap. This economic phenomenon perfectly describes Pakistan's current grid crisis. It's called a utility death spiral, where a shrinking base of consumers is left holding the bag, shouldering an ever-growing financial burden.
This step-by-step cycle shows exactly how the loop functions. Grid costs rise, so tariffs go up. To avoid the high tariffs, more users buy solar. Then overall grid sales fall, and the remaining users just have to pay even higher tariffs to cover those immovable fixed costs. By late 2024, solar adopters had successfully, though totally unintentionally, shifted 159 billion rupees in fixed grid costs right onto the shoulders of non-solar users.
Let's move to Part 4, the battery storage wave, the next major threat.
Let's see how this builds, because just as the grid is struggling with the sheer volume of solar panels, a massive drop in lithium-ion battery prices is creating a whole new existential threat. The power to completely detach from the grid lies heavily with large industrial users. They make up a staggering 67% of net metered installations right now, and they are rapidly investing in hybrid solar plus storage systems to make the state grid entirely optional.
If battery storage adoption follows this projected surge, jumping from 1.25 to 8.75 gigawatt-hours, the grid is in serious trouble. It could permanently remove up to 8.4% of actual grid demand by 2030. That would literally leave the utility companies entirely stranded, losing their biggest customers precisely during the most expensive evening peak hours.
Now for Part 5, the equity problem. Who pays when customers leave?
We really need to shift our perspective now to the harsh reality of who is actually getting left behind to foot the bill for this green revolution. Because they lack the capital or the roof space to go solar, renters, small shopkeepers, and lower-income citizens are effectively cross-subsidizing the wealthy who have successfully bypassed the grid. It's a massive wealth transfer hidden right inside an energy transition.
The government's reflex to simply slash solar incentives completely misdiagnoses the disease. The problem isn't too much solar, it's an inflexible legacy grid. The real solution lies in complex policy designs, like implementing community-shared solar schemes so renters can participate, and creating targeted lower-income subsidies to ensure the benefits of this transition are actually shared widely by everyone.
Finally, Part 6. Adapt or be left behind. The path forward.
Despite millions of citizens already moving toward a decentralized future, the formal grid planning apparatus is stubbornly acting like it's still the 20th century. To survive, the grid has to urgently implement these 4 structural adaptations: smart metering to manage bidirectional power flows, distribution-level storage to soak up surplus midday solar, value of solar tariffs, and honest integrated planning that accurately forecasts real-world demand. As millions of citizens have already made their choice, literally roof by roof, we have to ask, can a legacy power sector redesign itself in time to remain useful? Because the sun, it doesn't negotiate. Will the grid adapt or just become entirely irrelevant? It's a stark warning sign for legacy power grids everywhere, and definitely something to think about.